One thing that I don't think is spoken enough about when it comes to having ADHD and or autism is the fear of all of your relationships having this really great start and then this slow decline and crash and burn, because maybe you believe that all of your relationships start out great, but then maybe they implode once the other person finally sees who you actually are. And I think part of the issue that contributes to this is that a lot of us, when we first meet people, whether that's new friends or a romantic interest, are masking. And that makes sense because we want to make a good impression the first time we meet people. So on one extreme, you might be the type of person whenever you meet new people that you hyper focus on the other person. You give them all of your attention because you're genuinely interested. And because of that, you're asking them a lot of questions. And this person might feel safe. They might feel seen. They might feel like you're totally different than other people that they've been on a date with because you're not constantly talking about yourself. And while you're doing that, that might also be a coping protective mechanism because you're kind of analyzing this other person to make sure that they're a safe person and making sure that they're compatible with you. On the other extreme of that, you might be the type of person who might overshare and get really excited because you're telling them everything that you're passionate about, you're telling them your life story, and this person might feel like you're so refreshing compared to all the other people that they went on dates with or all the people that they've tried to make friends with, because other people just don't seem as open, they don't seem as vulnerable, they don't seem like interested in creating that connection. And in either case, you are trying to be genuine, you are trying to get to know this person, but part of it might be masking, part of it might be a protective coping mechanism. It's wild because you can think back at all these different times that you've met people for the first time and be like, oh, I could tell that this person was interested in me. I could tell that this person liked me. But the issue with that is you're not going to be able to keep up that persona or that mask all the time, because hopefully you would be able to trust these people and you would get to know them long enough that you would be able to unmask, or inevitably the mask is going to come off no matter how hard you try. Let's keep in mind, you have ADHD and or autism, you're going to get overstimulated, you're going to get triggered, you're going to have issues, and that person's going to see the real you. Stuff like this can become more challenging whenever you're hearing dating advice or advice about making new friends where they tell you, yeah, you should really show up as your most authentic self when you're first meeting people. But if you have ADHD and or autism, and especially if you're high masking and maybe you don't even realize that you're masking, and if you add trauma to that and protective coping mechanisms, that's really hard to do. Because one, you might not even know who you actually are, so showing up as your most authentic self is like, well, I don't even know who that person is. So not to mention you have years of meticulously making all of these masks, and part of you is like, well, I didn't make these masks for nothing, they gotta come out sometime. But also you have years of learning how to protect yourself, and being able to drop that guard automatically is going to be really challenging for a lot of people, especially because this person is a stranger. You just met them and you don't even know if you can trust them or even trust yourself, depending on what happens during that meeting. So anyway, back to the story. You meet this romantic interest or these new friends, you've put on a mask, you all are having a great time, this person feels really interested in you, you all start talking, you all start dating, and maybe it's going great for a while, but over time, that real authentic you, that ADHD, that autism is going to slowly start slipping through the cracks. The meltdowns, the overstimulation, the trauma, the triggers. And I want to be clear that this isn't specific just to ADHD and or autistic people. This happens to anybody who's putting on a front whenever they first meet someone. It's a little different when it comes to ADHD and or autism because it's extremely difficult to explain to another person, especially if they're a neurotypical or they're somebody who just does not understand how ADHD and or autism works, even if they are ADHD or autistic. And especially if that person is masking and they are ashamed of who they actually are and they're ashamed of their ADHD and or autism, and they see you start being a little bit ADHD or a little bit tizzy, they're gonna be like, ooh, I don't know about that. Or on the other end of that, they do accept your ADHD and or autism and are willing to work with it, but since you haven't educated yourself on your symptoms, your preferences, your needs, and everything like that, and or maybe you hold shame about who you actually are, you're gonna start pushing them away, shaming yourself when you do have these meltdowns, these overstimulated moments, these triggers, these traumas popping up. And since you're shaming yourself for not being able to keep up this persona of who you were when you all first met, when you were masking and not being your authentic self, they're going to catch on to that. And they're either going to try to understand what's going on and try to work with your needs and your preferences and learn about your ADHD, autism, mental illness, whatever you got going on. Or on the other end of that, since you're not being the person that you were when you all first met, they're going to be like, ooh, I don't know if I actually am compatible with you or if I want to work with you through these things. So obviously, whenever you start to unmask and show who you actually are, there's going to be a difference in the dynamic. And this might cause you to teeter-totter between shaming and blaming yourself and telling yourself if you could just be who you were pretending to be, then maybe you'd be able to save the relationship, and maybe you try to go back into masking and then you inevitably can't keep masking, and so you keep masking and then you keep seeping through the cracks, you keep masking, you keep seeping through the cracks, and then there's this push and pull. It's confusing you, it's confusing your partner or your new friends. You're feeling vulnerable, you're feeling scared, and or you're also blaming the other person. You're holding a lot of resentment because you feel like the other person isn't being as accepting or understanding of of who you actually are, which may or may not be the case. So they're either going to be supportive, and if you don't understand your own ADHD and or autism and how to work with that, and you can't explain that to them, then eventually that relationship or friendship is going to end. Or on the other hand, they're not being supportive. They do not want to work with your ADHD and or autism. They do not feel like you all are compatible, in which case the relationship or friendship ends. And so this might be why you have difficulty maintaining friendships or relationships, or why friendships or relationships don't go further than the first couple of hangouts. And this might be even why you get so burnt out in friendships or relationships, because people might like the person you're presenting yourself to be at first, but as they get to know you and start to understand the upkeep that is required to be your friend or be your partner, they might become uninterested, which can be really overwhelming and upsetting, especially if these people showed you so much affection and interest in the beginning, and especially if they made you feel so special for being so different from all the other people that they met, but ironically end up losing interest in the same things that they thought were so special about you initially. And again, this is because they may not know how to, or they may not be interested in all the upkeep that it takes to be able to work with your needs and your preferences. Okay, cool. How do we work with this? Start to educate yourself on ADHD and or autism or any other conditions that you might have. How do these things affect your life specifically? What are your symptoms? What are your preferences? What are your needs? How can you learn to manage your symptoms? How can you learn to work with them instead of against them? And also, how can you communicate your needs, your preferences, your symptoms, not just the needs that you have in regards to your ADHD, autism, or other conditions, but also your needs that you have in regards to relationships or the other areas of your life. Get to know yourself, and as you start to meet new friends or new romantic interests, you can start to tell them who you are and what you like. What are your needs? What are your preferences? How do you like to be taken care of? How would you like them to show up for you? What do you expect from them? What can you provide to them as well? So yeah, is this a foolproof plan? Does this mean that you're not going to mask initially, especially if you have CPTSD or you have ADHD and or autism whenever you first meet people? No, you probably most likely will. It's a really hard habit to shake, but you can lessen the amount that you are masking, and you can start to be more authentically you a lot sooner than you would have. And as you start to dismantle the shame around your conditions and your diagnoses, you're going to feel a lot more safe and a lot more comfortable expressing this stuff to other people. Now, this does not mean that when you meet new people, everybody's going to like you or they're going to sign up to be your friend or your partner just because you were able to communicate effectively to them about what you need. But it does mean that you're going to be able to weed out the people who are not compatible with you a lot sooner. And it's going to help you not shame yourself or other people as much whenever you all find out if you're compatible or not. Sometimes you're just not everybody's cup of tea, and sometimes they're not your cup of tea either. Because that's another thing to consider. Sometimes when we are masking, when we meet people, we conform ourselves to the image of what we think that they want from us, and that's not good either. And then later you might find out not only do they not enjoy the person that you are unmasked, but you might not even enjoy who they are once you start to unmask, because you're like, I was actually just performing for you, and now that I actually know you, I don't really like you that much either. I don't know, just a thought. But anyway, my name is Sarah. I'm your favorite self-experimenting coach or companion, and I help get people reacquainted with who they most authentically are. You're an amazing person, and I hope you have the best day.